then come back. We got ready to go on the air, and the cameraman came rushing back, and all of a sudden he said, "Somebody take over," and he fell on the floor, passed out.
Turns out the cameraman's shoulder popped out of its socket and he collapsed on the floor to pop it back in place. Still, the show went on. At that time, there was just one newscast at 6 o'clock. Later, Bruner hosted a second newscast at noon. While we enjoy 5 cameras in the studio today, back in the 50s, there was often only one.
And believe it or not, I'd introduce a picture and the camera would pan over to the picture and pan back to the newscaster and this type of thing.
In 1959, Dave Shea joined the staff and stuck around for a few decades, at first anchoring an evening newscast at 10:30.
She was not booked, but she was held overnight here in the Cedar Rapids City Jail.
In those days, the news, weather, and sports were all isolated segments with no interaction.
But all of that changed in 1960. This promotion picture shows Conrad, Tate, and I moving the 10:30 newscast to 10 o'clock and doing a much more integrated news, weather, and sports program, which we called Report to Iowa. I don't know that we originated it, but we were among the very first in the nation to adopt that kind of format, which is standard today.
But as technology began to take over and provide new and better ways of bringing information to the masses, that all began to change. The first seismic shift coming in the mid-60s, when the first color television cameras arrived.
Are you all set, Bob? Take it away in full spectrum color.
Well, Doug, first I'd like to say this, that I feel doubly honored to have been chosen to be the first one involved in our big change, because there are so many much more colorful characters around here than this reporter.
Another monumental change happened in the 70s when portable microwave transmitters led to the first live shots in eastern Iowa.
Stand by.
Okay, up on 2 and queuing.
A crude oil pipeline would run through several farms in northeastern Lynn County and right through a county park. Mike has a live Instacam report on the pipeline battle.
Dave, I'm reporting from the Maxwell Bridge County Park, the eastern part of Lynn County.
It was the golden era.
John Bachman, who went on to a long career at WHO TV in Des Moines, spent much of the 70s here, honing his craft by some of the best in the business.
Being able to co-anchor with Dave Shea was tremendous. I mean, he was a mentor and a close friend.
For 34 years, Eastern Iowans welcomed Dave Shea into their homes, but for countless colleagues, it was much more.
Was just an outstanding personality.
I was just a young 20-something reporter, and I just looked at him in awe.
It's a wonderful time in my career to be able to work alongside him and the rest of the team.
I grew up watching Channel 2, watching Dave Shea.
Dave retired in 1993. Now, at 94, Dave has spent 5 years without his beloved wife, losing her to memory loss. Unfortunately, now Dave himself is going through the same terrifying condition, but with the grace he's remembered for.
He's been a great model to us who know and love him for the way he's upbeat, even when he's experienced some, losses that are distressing to him that he can't remember much.
In the mid-50s, Iowa's News Now worked with Rockwell Collins to develop a multi-part documentary educating Eastern Iowans about the secrets of flight. For the first time, a wind tunnel was seen in public to demonstrate how it all worked.
You might see it even better if I turn the blower down so that the whole field slows down and we see it in a slower motion.
The pioneering broadcast earned a George Foster Peabody Award, one of the most prestigious awards a news organization can earn.
Can I ask you guys what you're dumping?
Almost 40 years later, another Peabody, this time for uncovering the biggest case of government corruption in Iowa history, the Cedar Rapids sewer solvent scandal. Leaders were buying chemicals at massively inflated prices, all at the expense of taxpayers.
Intertrade was selling sewer solvent to the city for $27.50 a gallon, but Hydride of Waterloo will sell us a product that will accomplish the same job for just $1.80 a gallon.
Is somebody lining their pockets here?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't think so.
A number of people were lining their pockets and they went to prison for it.
Along the way, I'll be honest, there were a lot of threats, a lot of people who blamed me for ruining lives. But I guess the best day out of all of that was when everything went through the court system and one of the key players came out of court, and he came up to me and shook my hand and said, "I don't blame you. This was not your fault."
When accepting the Peabody, Sandy Riesgraff repeated something said the first time Broadcast Park earned a Peabody nearly 40 years earlier.
We don't claim to have the highest tower, the most powerful transmitter, or even to have the most authoritative voice. But we know our neighbors watch and listen to us. And for this reason, more than any other, we do our best to say what's important.
What's important can oftentimes be very personal, including during the job crisis of the early 80s. Barry Norris and others at Broadcast Park had a unique idea.
Dump our primetime programming and let people step up to a camera and say,
"Hi, my name's John Waller, and my number is 7051, and I'm looking for work."
So unique, it got attention around the world. And from the leader of the free world.
I call to compliment you on what you're doing.
Some of the most talked about stories from the 90s featured a baby girl stuck between two families.
She wants her baby home where she belongs with her mother and her father.
Baby Jessica was given up for adoption at birth by her mother, but shortly after, she told the father what she had done, and he fought to get her back. After a 2-year battle, the little girl was taken away from the only parents she ever knew in Michigan and returned to her parents in eastern Iowa.
Heart-wrenching to watch that transfer because there were two families that loved this little girl and she was 2.
And then there is Jody.
This is CityCast with Jody Husentroot.
Our former colleague here was on her way to anchor the morning news in Mason City when she vanished in 1995. To this day, there have been no signs of Jody and no clue as to who took her. 2001 brought one of the most devastating days in American history.
Today our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America.
The World Trade Center attacked by terrorists and destroyed in a matter of minutes.
It was all hands on deck.
The impacts far and wide, especially when air travel was halted for days.
And I was sent out to the airport, and it was just such a surreal experience, I remember, because the airport was completely empty.
Weather has always played a major role in the work we do, but never greater than some of the major disasters experienced in recent memory.
The railroad bridge has collapsed. It is now floating downstream in the Cedar River.
The flood of 2008 impacted hundreds of communities and devastated downtown Cedar Rapids, taking with it hundreds of businesses and thousands of homes.
Memories of my kids' pictures gone, probably. Everything's gone. It's really hard to deal with.
Even forcing Mercy Medical Center to shut down 10 blocks from the river.
That's so far away from the river. How did the water get down to 10th and 8th? You know, that's so far removed from the Cedar River.
And threatening to take the city's water supply with it, saved at the last moment by the residents themselves.
And I got back up there and there were just cars all over the place. Hundreds of cars, people coming out with shovels.
That's an amazing
There were
sight.
over 1,000 people there. They just showed up out of nowhere. And
to this day, Cedar Rapids is still working to defend itself from the next great flood. The pandemic and derecho of 2020 combined for a 1-2 punch of perseverance by eastern Iowa. Days without power in hot and humid conditions, all while trying to protect one another from a virus.
Because I had maybe an hour to 2 hours left to live.
That would eventually kill more than 1 million Americans.